This is episode 27 of Hoops Forum, a production of Radius Athletics and a Quick Time Out podcast. I'm Tony Miller, and I'm joined once again by my co-host, Randy Sherman. Thanks again to our sponsors over at 323 Sports. Right now, they're offering several options on team packs, including one for under $100, which includes a jersey, shorts, tee, and a backpack. To find out more about what they can do for your basketball program, visit 323sports.com, or you can contact a rep at 323 Sports, sales at 323sports.com. That's where you'll be able to reach him. They'll be sure to do it right for your sports program. Randy, middle of the summer, hot days, things going all right down there in Texas?
Heating up, back to school. A lot of coaches I work with who live and coach in Texas are having to go back to school and get things going.
Yeah, right around the corner. I'm enjoying my last days of summer up here in Minnesota.
Well, you had an experience up in Minnesota. You went to a coaching clinic, the Basketball Immersion Academy, a real live coaching clinic. How was that?
It was different. It was, it's always fun to get around a lot of other coaches. It's just kind of the timing of it, serendipitous of me being up here at the same time. And I think both of us have watched a lot of what Chris does and
sure.
Learned a lot from so being able to be there in person. This was a unique one. He asked Doug Novak to come. It was a 2-day clinic. And so he spent most of Monday, Doug spent most of Monday, kind of teaching what they do there at Bethel and their conceptual offense. So it was extremely helpful for me. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So I guess I think back to any time I went to a weekend type clinic like that, whether it was multiple speakers or just like observing some practices over the weekend of a team or something like that. I tried to come home and like synthesize what I learned or notes that I took into sort of like, okay, here's a lot of stuff, but like maybe extracting from that, a handful, 3, maybe 4, just like immediate, just really revelations or things I immediately want to put into my coaching that I think are applicable, or maybe 3 or 4 like thought-provoking things that I took away that like, I never thought of that before, or that's a new way of saying that. Or so I would ask you, since you spent the weekend, in this learning environment, and let's run through your highlights, your 3 or 4 bullet point takeaways from the Basketball Immersion Academy. So fire away.
When you suggested this, I thought it was a great idea, but it's kind of on those 2 days, you feel like you're drinking from a fire hydrant because of just everything. And the speakers that he brought, I think everyone understands, like Chris's thinking, it's kind of out of the box. And he says all the time, like, I'm trying to stimulate thinking. And so the speakers that he brought in really stimulated thinking, but it went so quickly. Grabbing 4 was a little bit difficult. We'll see if I picked 4 that hopefully others will benefit from. The first one for me, anytime you go to a clinic, I think that, hearing a lot of times we go to clinics, and the traditional clinics, you sit there, and I know a lot of coaches think, I've heard this before, we already do that. And so they stopped going to clinics. And that was one thing that we talked about while we were there. It was just the coaches, I think, offering them something to think outside the box. And for me, thinking about like terminology, and as a teacher, thinking about teaching cues, that's something that I know that we've mentioned here on this show again. One of the speakers was Max Lefevre. He's a player development guy and the video coordinator for the Minnesota Timberwolves. By the way, if you're not following him on Twitter, like, go check him out and dig into him a little bit. Like, young guy, he coached with, he was on staff with Chris Beard at Texas Tech. So like more modern thinking, defensive minded. He talked about defensive concepts, and there's a couple of things that I'll come back to something else that he said later on. But this, the teaching cue of 60-40 was one thing that he talked about. The modern game, we know, like staying on corner shooters. I have in the past taught almost going out and like denying a corner shooter. But this idea of like 60-40, it was more of the idea that you're going to be kind of 60% to the ball and 100% committed to your man. And I think that ties in closely with like your closeouts, which is another thing that we'll come back and talk about. But just like that little teaching point, I just use that as an example. It may
Yeah.
be something that a coach can take away, like, and use with their team. But it was something that just very small that can make a huge difference in arriving on a catch, taking away a shot that could end your season. So I think like terminology, we've talked about this before, but like some that follow me may have seen when I talked about, I tweeted something that Ben Johnson at Minnesota said, but you can have all the terminology in the world, but if it confuses your players or slows
Yeah.
down your players thinking, like it's not good to have that. I don't know your thoughts about terminology or even some of the stuff that you used with your team.
Yeah, I think that's the terminology piece, and like really getting better in that arena as a coach is sort of like maybe a maturation process for a coach that I think is a frontier to definitely explore as a teacher of the game. Do some research and reading on the language we use as coaches and what is effective and what is ineffective as far as cueing and giving directives. I read a book recently by Nick Winkelman called The Language of Coaching that really talks about the language we use and little things like being 60-40 and how that level of cueing exists on a higher plane as term as player understanding and player retention than saying put your left foot right here and your right arm right here and all these internal cues. So yeah, that I think if I can come away from a clinic with I used to say it this way, but this is better, like I'll immediately adopt it with like no procrastination. If there's a teaching cue, a bit of language, an analogy that a coach makes that like teaches something that I've already been teaching, but then in a more enlightening and more sticky fashion. I don't think about it. I don't go like, yeah, maybe I should I call it that, or should I keep calling it what I used to call it? I immediately, and that's how you know when something's a good idea, though, the speed at which you adopt it.
Yeah, for sure. The second thing was emphasis on the micro skills of player development. There were several D1 coaches who spoke this past weekend, and I know our infatuation with plays and systems, but I really think that the coaches who know anything are they're understanding the importance of those micro skills, especially in regards to finishing and shooting, and just also how important it is for coaches to know how to communicate and teach those to players. Like Doug spent so much time on Monday. He introduced talking about footwork and teaching the stride stop and like the details with that and what you do. You may have heard this terminology, but like a protection plan once I get into the paint and what I do with the ball and how that relates to the players that I'm playing next to. And I think that we oftentimes gloss over that. A lot of coaches will gloss over that because they don't necessarily know all the micro details that go into it. So just the necessary point of being a student of the game and really, again, kind of either understanding terminology and what it actually means or knowing how to teach really micro skills of a stride stop or your footwork or your shooting or whatever. And it goes to the bigger point of being more efficient and more effective with the basketball. And I think a lot of coaches know about that, but they don't necessarily know how to teach that.
Yeah, I think that the way I always look at it and encourage the coaches I work with to look at it is a matter of time allocation. And you have a budget of minutes with your team in a season, and when you spend one of those minutes, it's not replenished; it's gone, right? So how you spend them really matters. And when I see coaches like Coach Novak, or like another one that comes to mind would be like Jay Wright of Villanova, who tactically speaking, the complexity of their offense is very low. Like I could learn the Villanova 4-out motion. I could teach it to a group of junior high boys, like as far as where are 4 spots. When we pass here, we cut there. We said a ball screen either here, and like that has tactically has a low time demand. But in order for that offense to produce points, the player, the skills my players need to have has a high time demand in order to instill those. So it's just a matter of how you want to allocate your time. If I want to ramp up a bunch of tactical complexity, I don't have time, given that that's not going to be replenished. That's not going to be renewed. Once those minutes are gone there, I don't have time to ramp up the skill development piece as much. So I think what we're seeing from a lot of coaches now who are like, let's keep the tactical aspects as far as like the complexity of the intricacy, the things like that go into learning and memorizing our offense. Let's turn that dial down to where, and then turn the dial up on the skills our players need to run this offense optimally, and then devote our practice time to really branding that into our team.
Just paraphrasing something Doug said, perfect example of that was, he said, spacing is the easy part. Like, I can teach a team how to space.
Sure.
The real magic is teaching a team how to use space. And what he was saying with that is like that, what you were talking about, like the Villanova thing, like the big picture, it's easy to teach that. You can communicate that to your team and teach that pretty well, but like how to actually execute it and the details of it, and teaching an individual player how to use space and play with the man next to him.
Yeah.
Like, that's where the real magic is. And, I think that again is what's going to separate coaches, great coaches from maybe average or even slightly above average coaches. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was a good one there.
Good. So third takeaway.
Third one here. This is another one from Coach Lefevre from the T-Wolves. This is always one that you bring up on Twitter, and then like you post about it and then you just watch it burn. Closeouts. So the third one is closeouts, and how do you teach closeouts? 4 things. I've got like 3, but the last one's like 2 and 1. But I would challenge coaches with 4 things here. The first one is that Max brought up is we only want one-way closeouts. So, even in the NBA, teams are, this is a little bit different, but like teams are loading to the basketball. They're sitting in the gaps already, and then on the kick out, they're closing out the shooters.
Yeah.
And some teams, they're not even teaching stunt anymore. They're literally teaching you stand here in this gap. Again, the kind of that 60-100 that we talked about in the beginning. That's why I wanted to start with that. But they don't want their help defenders' momentum at all going towards the basketball. So that's your one direction. And then going back out on the kick out to their shooter, that would be a 2-way closeout. So again, a really small detail, and I think a lot of coaches kind of think about that and understand that, but I still see a lot of people, they don't want to give up any kind of drive. So they still want to go into the stunting. I don't even stunt anymore. I don't know how you feel about that, but already being there so that you're able to quickly, that's the half-second thing again. And I think that maybe you can get away with it a little bit at the high school level, but then as you move up to college and then obviously NBA, those half seconds, tenths of a second make the difference between a made shot and a missed shot. So something to just think about. I don't know what your feelings are about that.
This is something with the pressure man-to-man that's always been baked into it, that I taught that when a player begins a drive if I'm a defender in the headlights of that drive, like on the ball side or one pass away, my responsibility is to my check, my man, not to the ball. I may shrink that space if I so choose, but my mandate is to not give up a kick 3 on the ball side, period. So I'm not a big technique and junkie like that. I'm more externally cueing players of like, here's your assignment. Should you choose to accept it, like for Mission Impossible, right? Is like, don't give up a ball side kick 3. Accomplish that however you want, but don't. One analogy along the 60-40 line that I use with my players was imagine the sport of baseball, and a player is on first base, a base runner, and he takes a lead off. So the base runners on first base, they've walked or got a single or whatever. They take a lead off the first base bag, and they're contemplating stealing second base. And the pitcher's pitching from the stretch, and they've got their move to the first base bag, and you kind of have to judge your lead off on the quality of that move and your speed and things like that. But like, don't get picked off. like don't get picked off. Like, do not be an out on the base pass ever, right? So this that analogy of like, I can get 60-40, but what I'm equating to getting picked off is that if they kick it to my man for a 3, I got picked off, right? And that's a no-no. So and I don't have responsibility to stop the ball. That's another maybe kind of things that coaches like maybe would be a change for them, is that if they penetrate into my gap, I don't have responsibility to start the ball. I'm actually going back to my man, and we pull help from the help side. So that's always been something that I taught as a sort of baked in component of pressure man to man. But that analogy of like that, the base runner really stuck with me, of like, just don't get picked off. You can stunt, you can shrink the gap if you want, or shrink that space with your positioning if you like, but don't get picked off, And you can make the analogy that like a good shooter with a quick release is like a pitcher who has a great move to first base. Like if Steph Curry's standing in that corner, like I got to take a short lead off, man, because like any little space I give him is trouble, right?
Yeah, that's good. It's the second part with this. This is, I think, the part that most coaches don't like, but no chopping of feet. They're sprinting out to a shooter. They're turning it almost at like that 45-degree angle and stopping. And, I understand the traditional thinking behind the choppy feet, but I mean, even if you're thinking about it from a perspective of like a kid playing tag, the body mechanics that a kid uses to when you're running after a kid and that kid darts off and you change directions. I don't chop my feet when I'm approaching that player. And the other principle too, where a lot of times in the NBA, they're running them off the line. That's not the only reason why you do this, but, and I understand at the high school, even junior high levels, like not everybody can shoot from out there. And so, but it really is, they're not giving up a shot. I mean, they're not giving up a drive. It's not like everybody's just sprinting out and running a guy off the line and then everybody's having to rotate on the backside. That's not how it works either. So I feel like there's as much knowing a scouting report if you don't chop your feet as there is if you do chop your feet. So why am I going to go against the natural body mechanics of what a player is already doing?
Yeah, I think the question around this that I would ask or encourage coaches to ask themselves is like, what am I comfortable with giving up, or how am I okay with an outcome? I think the real bigger question is like, coaches have to sort of get that sort of mentality, especially around coaching defense, of like having against a good team and a good outfit, a good group. You kind of got to make some decisions about what you're okay with giving up and living with. That's the big question. If you want to chop feet and chop down and stop short, that's certainly a camp that's out there, and there's rationale behind it, and I get it, I really do, but the thinking needs to be mature thinking of like, we're doing this because we want to stop a drive, and we'll do our best to get a hand up on a shooter and contest it. But if it goes in, like don't think like a brat, right? Like you've got to make a decision, and what are you going to give up, and what outcome or what outcome are you disincentivizing for the offense? What are you okay with living with? And if you get beat that way, hand them the trophy.
Yeah. Here's what this last one, 2-1, and this is the video is actually of everything we're talking about, which is why I pulled it up. The last one's 2-1, but that idea of being like the second shooter off the ground. So if a shooter shoots, then jump up and contest the shot with your shot.
Absolutely.
I know that's one of the things, the feedback I get from coaches is, well, that's just one, they say it's just too hard, and I don't know exactly what that means. I mean, you drill it just like you drill everything else. And then their second why we don't do this is they're afraid of fouling. And Max said, at the NBA level, we're teaching them you're contesting a right-handed shooter with a right-handed shot, or with a right-hand contest. On a left-handed shooter, we're contesting it with our left hand. And coaches will say to me then, like, well, that's too hard. But those same coaches are the ones that are using the Kobe closeouts or Nash closeouts. Like, it's all scout. So you're either scouting this, or
their
you're
handedness or their shooting ability. Yeah,
you're scouting something here. So I mean, from these videos, you can talk it while we're watching this, but this just shows the one-way directional closeouts, the contesting with the hand. So on a right-hand shooter, left-hand shooter.
Okay.
And there's not very many. You may see like one or two stunts. I'm not saying that never happens in the NBA, but from what he said, they're teaching those just one direction closeouts here. So, closing out.
Yeah. So the player was in, number 21 there. He was in when the drive began, and he closed out only toward the ball. And so some of these the shot goes in anyway,
right.
And that's life, right?
Right.
You can do everything right in life and still lose, right? So I think the thing that the underpinning of all of this is the analytics behind the indisputable fact that if we make them dribble even once, the percentages drop off. So, at the NBA level, like the clips you just showed, that's true. I would assume it's probably also true at other levels, right? So if I can just stand there, catch and shoot, I shoot 39%. But if you fly at me and make me bring the ball down, and even if I still attempt a three but take a little dribble to the side, my percentage probably drops a percentage point or two. So is that worth it? Perhaps it is. So the number one teaching point that I use with my teams with pressure man-to-man was, and how we evaluated a possession after we watched it through, and did we switch correctly, or is our help? And so, like, to put a bow on a possession is, did they dribble to a shot? So if the answer to did they dribble to a shot, not a layup, but a shot, did they dribble to a shot? If the answer to that question is yes, I'm happy as the coach. We're putting the cue externally on the opponent. Like, what did they have to do? They had to dribble to a shot. Sometimes that goes in, and we run at them and they fake it and they dribble twice, and we get a closeout behind the closeout, contest that, and they hit a floater. Okay, but did they dribble to a shot? Yes. Then we probably were true to our objectives.
Yeah. All right. Last thing here was the idea of using constraints with our small-sided games, and I think that's kind of what makes a small-sided game a small-sided game. Is how you use your constraints. How do you define? I'm sure you talk about this with your players, but like, how do you define what a constraint, or with your coaches, excuse me, how do you define what a constraint is?
A constraint might be a rule placed on the game, the drill or the game, that exists to encourage or discourage an outcome or a behavior. So that might be better just to give an example. So, like, maybe we're playing 3-on-3, but I give a constraint, say 3-on-3, no dribble. So that we're constraining the offensive team. We're putting a rule that doesn't exist in the actual game of basketball. You can actually dribble in the game of basketball, but like in this game, we're putting a constraint on it, saying you can't dribble. So why do that? Why put that constraint on the offense? Well, it's because I'm trying to encourage some sort of behavior. Maybe I'm encouraging, if we're playing 3-on-3, there's one player who's got the ball and two players who don't. I want to encourage them screening for one another. So, and to work on setting pin downs or cross screens or something like that. Or I'm wanting to encourage cutting, so So if we, and passing, so we pass and we cut and we fill and we play off of that. And so that'd be an example. I'm really just trying to accentuate a behavior and get, and maybe instill a habit that I need a rule, a constraint that's above and beyond what exists in the game in its natural state in order to bring about.
I like the way Chris put it. I mean, simply put, but anything that can help shape learning. That's really what you just said. But like what specific skill or specific idea or tactic or whatever am I trying to achieve by adding in, like you said, the no dribbles? So anything that can help shape learning. He also said something, to stimulate learning, there must be an advantage. I think a lot of times coaches that maybe aren't as familiar with small-sided games think you're just checking it up with a player standing in front of you, and then you're just randomly playing, and that's not really what we're referring to here. For me, the one that I pulled up here is a drill that I've showed probably before. This is like the adjusted version of it. Let me turn back real quick to the normal version of it. The 3-on-3 closeouts where you kind of whip it around the perimeter, the one more, and then throw it out. You're playing live 3-on-3. So you're closing out all those different colors. Who you're closing out to. So on the pass, X1 is closing out to 1, whatever. Okay. So I mean, a great small-sided game, one that I know a lot of coaches use. We use it a ton. But being more intentional about the constraints that I use within that. So that drill can very quickly, even by moving them around the perimeter. So one way that we could change it is where are they catching this now? So this is the exact same drill, but I'm first moved it around the perimeter, but then I could add another constraint into it and say, and I've done this in the past, but again, this is one of those where I feel like if I'm more intentional about it, I can maybe accomplish more in the time I have. We need to have a post touch before we have a score, or we need to have a skip pass before we score, or we need to attack the paint before we score, whatever you're trying to work on. Again, like what are we trying to shape here? How can I adjust this, add a constraint? You don't want 45 constraints in your drill, but like, is there something I can take away or add to it that will make this same drill? And that's, I think, the big thing. Most coaches just want like more drills. Like, man, I want a drill of 75 small-sided games. Probably, this is something I know you'll like because this is right in your vein. You probably only need like 10 small-sided games, but then use a bunch of different constraints and you'll probably be good.
Yeah, I call those Swiss Army knife drills, meaning like, it's one tool, it's one thing, goes in my pocket, but I can do lots of things with it. I can change it up like you've changed the positioning. And then once we go pop, 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 and it's live and we've all closed out and we're all checked out, then we're playing with some sort of constraint. One thing I would say, in addition to, put in the same family of constraints would be incentives, constraints and incentives. So what I often did, in addition to, not probably overlapping in the same moment, but like in addition to using constraints, like you said, like we got to have a paint touch, or we got to have a ball reversal, or a screener has to score, or something like that. Whereas what I almost grew to like even more was incentives and disincentives. So like what an example might be, we're gonna do this drill, pop, 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 close out, close out, close out. Once it's live, we're gonna play normal basketball with no constraints, but the way we score it is incentivizes. So I might say, okay, you can make a basket without getting a paint touch, but we're only going to give you 1 point for it. But if we paint touch kick, we're going to double the point value of the made shot, or something like that, to where I'm not having to say, maybe think about, okay, I've got to follow this extra rule that that almost sometimes feels like it sort of manufactures some awkward like attempts to get that paint touch, but like just play as normal, but like what's going to, we just increase this score value on maybe the behaviors we're wanting to see more of. So it's just sort of like praising what you want to see repeated. So if we can get, okay, here we're going to play 3-on-3, our offensive rebounding numbers are really low. If we get a putback, it's worth 8 points or something like that, like really drive that up to where, now, okay, we can win this drill by just going and crashing hard, getting in there and getting a putback, a second shot opportunity in this possession. That's a small example, but like it's in the same family as constraints, but I would say constraints and incentives.
Yeah, I like that. I've done that before with like offensive rebounding. I've
Sure.
also seen like it taken to the extreme and actually worked against us, where you have like 5 incentives, and then the kids don't know. Again, if we're anything that can shape
Yeah.
learning, it becomes confusing where you have 5 constraints and five incentives, and
Yeah,
kids
let's
don't really
have
know.
one overall theme we're trying to
Mhm.
really accentuate here. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Paint
So
touches, offensive
yeah,
rebounds, whatever the case may be. Yeah.
yeah. So something like this, if you get the opportunity, I know everybody thinks that I can get everything that I need online, and I was talking again with Doug and Chris about this, but
I'm guilty of that.
yeah, the one being with other coaches and interacting with them, we've talked about the importance of just kind of stimulating thinking and encouraging one another and just learning from others. But for me, I think especially on Monday, what really helped, I've been to Doug Novak's website. I've spent as much time as anybody else has on there.
Hmm.
I've listened to his clinic sessions. This is just one example, but I've listened to his clinic sessions about things. We run their offense. I know about it. But to be able to sit there and hear him talk for an entire day about it, there was a lot of pieces that were filled in.
Yeah.
If you have gone to his website and think that everything you need is right there on his website, like it's not. I think just again the ability to package everything together like that was just that was super helpful, and I think it will help me in my teaching of that offense. So, again, just one example, but I wish more coaches took the time to go to those things and didn't think you're getting a lot of great crumbs and snacks when you
Yeah.
just try to get everything online.
And like you're actually sort of like getting the delivery, the
Hmm.
and maybe just maybe what makes someone a really good coach doesn't get conveyed in a blog post or doesn't get
Right.
conveyed in a video. It gets conveyed like, oh, the way he just touched that player on the back when he said
Yeah.
sorry, like little things like that, or the way he, or she, if it's a female coach, the way they timely interjected that redirective cue or something like little things like that, like you don't get from
Yeah.
someone sharing a edited video or a blog post or a diagram for sure. So I've been guilty of that. Like I always get asked, like, why haven't you done a live event, Radius Athletics clinic or something live? And I'm like, I can tweet out a link and have more people
Mhm.
on that and than I ever would get on a plane or in their car and come. But yeah, something I need to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. Before we go, want to tell you about our sponsors at Sideline Interactive. If you're looking to increase your school's revenue, improve the fan experience, or you just need to upgrade the look of your gym, Sideline Interactive is the leading manufacturer in scoring tables and video display boards for high schools and coaches around the country. To find out more, visit sidelineinteractive.com. Appreciate all of those who joined us this week. If you missed any part of the live show, you can go back and watch any part of that on the Radius Athletics YouTube page, or you can listen to the interview. Just search a Quick Timeout podcast and you'll find the audio version of the show. I usually don't add this one in, but if you all have any topics, things that you would like for us to discuss, Randy, you got any ideas for next week? This is the conversation, by the way, that Randy and I have every time we hang up. So I figured we'd give you a behind the scenes peek of it. I see a lot of
Not
people
yet.
dropping off the live feed, but if you were to stay on, you would be the one that would help us determine. So those of you that remain, if you have anything that you would like for us to discuss, we usually brainstorm through the week, but either tweet
Yeah.
us at Radius Athletics or at Tony W. Miller.
Yeah. DM, email, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So we
Yeah. I
hope to.
usually come up with some sort of thought midweek on a bike ride or a run or something. But yeah, whatever. Any outside stimulation would be awesome.
Just send those to us and we'll prepare something for you for next week. Until then, I'm Tony Miller. He's Randy Sherman. We'll talk to you again next week.